Certainly looks great fun. Well, it's time now for a look at what's making the front pages of today's international papers. That's in our press review with Elena Casas, who joins me now. Hello, Elena.
Hello again.
OK, so Egypt still at the top of our news bulletins here on France 24 this Friday, as those worrying reports emerge as well about attacks on female journalists in Tahrir Square, and they're making newspaper headlines, aren't they?
There's one woman on a lot of today's front pages, Lorna, the Egyptian-American journalist Mona El-Tahawi. She's quite well known already. We've had her here even on France 24, but she caused an international panic on Twitter yesterday Wednesday evening, when she tweeted that she'd been arrested. Now, she was released yesterday after 12 hours in custody in Cairo's Interior Ministry, and she's tweeted all the details of what happened there. Now, she alleges she suffered a serious sexual assault, saying that she doesn't even know how many hands were trying to get into her underwear. And she typed yesterday morning, "I can hardly type." It turns out her right arm and her left hand were broken in the assault that she suffered. And that really has been picked up by newspapers all around the world. The Guardian say in a report that there does seem to be a worrying trend of the Egyptian security forces targeting foreign journalists. A Spanish photographer was also beaten up yesterday, they report. And in Le Monde, they say a French journalist from the TV channel François, a woman journalist, was assaulted sexually during 3/4 of an hour yesterday. She says she spoke to the paper. She says she thought she was going to die, and that what happened to her would correspond to the dictionary definition of rape. So the paper starts to ask this debate that was started back in January when CBS's Lara Logan was assaulted, of course, which is, should newsrooms even be sending female journalists to these kinds of war zones? Reporters Without Borders has sent a communiqué now saying they actually recommend newsrooms do not send women into Tahrir Square, although Le Monde points out that Lara Logan herself, after that assault, said that she would hate to see the consequence of that being that women were not sent to those kinds of war zones. She said that would be a retrograde step.
Indeed. OK, well, we'll have to see how that pans out in the next few days and weeks. But Syria, another big story on making the international press this Friday, because President Assad has until this lunchtime to agree to allow foreign observers into Syria. But one photographer has managed to get into the city of Homs, which has been off limits to foreign journalists.
There's an extraordinary photo reportage in The Guardian, which is actually by a French photographer who went there as a freelance, and he says he had to cover his face with a scarf to stop security forces taking his picture. He says he was in Homs for a month and he saw people being shot at in the street regularly, but he does also say they're firing back at security forces with rocket launchers. Now, in The Independent, they've been talking to a leading Syrian opposition figure who's in exile in Istanbul. He tells the paper he hopes that Assad can be removed without any more blood being shed, although, as I was saying, this does seem unlikely because parts of Syria seem to be falling into a civil war situation. But he says he thinks Assad will be out in 6 months to a year rather than a shorter timeline, and that he thinks his departure can still be negotiated.
OK, well, Morocco, another big story this Friday. We were talking to Cyril Vanier in Rabat just a moment ago. They're going to the polls today. What do the papers have to say about that?
Well, there's an interesting article in The Guardian by a Moroccan journalist, Mohamed Ben Madani. He asks if these elections can loosen the king's tight grip on the country. Remember, the parliament that's set to be elected won't actually have all that much power. The king retains control of things like foreign and security policy. But the journalist says that what's really important is economic policy. He's asking if Morocco will follow Tunisia's example and elect a moderate Islamist party, the Justice and Development Party here. He says they've concentrated on youth unemployment, but it might be hard to change that in a country where the royal family has most of the wealth. The other big question, actually, is how many people are going to boycott that election. There's a blog article here by Ibn Kafka that's really done the rounds on the web. He explains in an article entitled "Thanks but No Thanks" why he won't be voting, and it's thought a lot of young Moroccans will be following his example because they just don't believe the system in place is democratic enough.
OK, well, we're going to hop over the channel now to the UK because journalists are in a bit of trouble there, aren't they? The ongoing Leveson inquiry into journalists' bad behaviour, that's on a lot of front pages.
Yep, J.K. Rowling here, she's been on a lot of front pages today. She told the Leveson inquiry yesterday that her 5-year-old was targeted by journalists. She had notes put in her school bag. They harassed her so much she had to move house. And but the Huffington Post is asking in an article if we actually might get the journalists that we deserve, saying that no one forces anyone to buy tabloid newspapers after all, and it's we as readers who create that demand and don't necessarily want facts to get in the way of a good story. So we can't just blame the tabloid hacks.
OK, thanks very much indeed, Elena, for that look at all today's international newspapers.